After 9 years of marriage, my wife left her phone on the kitchen counter, face up, unlocked, like it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't even looking for anything. But when the screen lit up, I saw a message I was never supposed to see, and everything I thought I understood about my life started to fall apart. She left her phone on the kitchen counter. That's where everything started. That's the part one keeps circling back to. Not what was on the phone. Not what I read. Just the leaving of it. Face up, no passcode, plugged into the charger next to the coffee maker at 7:40 on a Tuesday morning while she was upstairs in the shower. She had never done that before. 9 years of marriage and Nadia had never once left her phone unattended in a room I was standing in. I'd noticed this the way you notice any unspoken rule, not because someone told you, but because the pattern was so consistent it became invisible until the day it broke. The screen lit up with a notification. I wasn't snooping. I was pouring coffee. The counter is narrow, maybe 22 inches, and the phone was right next to the coffee maker because that's where the outlet is. When the screen flashed on, the preview was just there, inches from my hand. A contact saved as M. It said, "Last night was exactly what I needed. Thank you for everything." I finished pouring. Put the carafe back. Stood there and read that sentence 4 more times while something heavy slid through my chest like cold water through a pipe. I didn't react. I didn't make a sound. I just filed it away the way I file everything, carefully, in the place where things sit until I understand them well enough to act. Then I picked up my own phone, walked out to the back porch, and drank my coffee while the neighbor's sprinkler system kicked on for its 7:45 cycle, the same way it does every morning, the rotating heads sweeping back and forth across grass that was already too wet. I watched those sprinklers for maybe 10 minutes. And the whole time I was thinking about a conversation I had with my father when I was 22 and he was 61, about 6 months before a diagnosis that would kill him inside 3 years. We were sitting in his office. He still had his practice then, still going in every day, still writing wills for people who thought they had more time than they did. He said, "Eli, the most dangerous thing a man can be is reactive. The man who reacts is always 2 steps behind. But the man who thinks first, who builds his structures before he needs them, that man is never truly caught off guard. He might be hurt. He might lose things. But he always has a next move." My father was an estate attorney for 34 years. He spent his entire professional life thinking about endings before they arrived, and helping other people do the same. He was the least sentimental person I've ever known. He was also the most prepared. And I came to understand, eventually, that those weren't 2 separate traits. They were the same thing showing up in different ways. My name is Eli Marsh. I'm 40. I work in financial compliance at a regional bank, in a department that makes sure our internal structures hold up under audit, litigation, and regulatory scrutiny. My job, put simply, is to find gaps before anyone outside the institution finds them, and close them. I've done this for 12 years. Every performance review I've ever received says the same thing in slightly different language: thorough, meticulous, proactive. I had been doing the exact same thing inside my own marriage for 3 years before that Tuesday morning. Not because I knew. I need to be clear about that. I didn't have proof. I didn't have a name. I didn't have the kind of certainty that lets you point to a single thing and say, "There, that's it." What I had was a shift. A change in pattern I'd been tracking without quite naming, the way I might track a compliance anomaly at work before I know whether it's a real gap or just a procedural hiccup. You don't sound the alarm. You just note it. You build the record. Because the record is what saves you if the anomaly turns out to be something. The shift started roughly 38 months before that Tuesday. October, 3 years earlier. Nadia started coming home later from work. On its own, that meant nothing. She was a senior project manager at an architecture firm. Late evenings came with the job and always had. But the lateness changed in character. It started carrying a kind of composure that was too smooth. Too settled. Like whatever had happened that evening had been processed on the drive home, and by the time she walked through the door she'd already put it away somewhere I couldn't reach it. I'd known Nadia for 11 years by then. I knew what her real calm looked like, the slightly unfocused eyes, the way she'd kick off her shoes before she was fully inside. This new version was different. Tighter. More assembled. I started keeping a log that October. Nothing dramatic. A simple document, encrypted, stored on a personal drive disconnected from our shared household cloud. I recorded dates, times, observations. Not compulsively. Methodically. The way I'd log an anomaly at work. Date. Observation. How it deviated from the baseline. By the following spring I had 87 entries. Not a single one, on its own, proved anything. But taken together, they drew a shape. And the shape was familiar to me. The shape was a gap. During that same period, I began doing something I thought of as structural preparation. Not revenge. I want to be very specific about that word. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is reactive. What I was doing was making sure that if circumstances ever forced me to act, I'd be positioned to act correctly, legally, and with full information. The way you'd shore up a foundation before a storm you're not sure is coming. You don't hope for the storm. You just don't pretend foundations don't crack. The first step was finding an attorney. Her name was Ruth Caldwell. Family law, private practice, north side of the city. Finding her took me 6 weeks. I went through Bar Association records, published case outcomes, peer-review databases, and 2 academic papers she'd co-authored on how premarital and separate assets get treated in equitable distribution proceedings. I read both papers twice. They were precise and unsentimental, and I trusted the mind behind them before I ever sat in her office. I met with her on a Thursday afternoon in March, 2 years and 4 months before Nadia left her phone on the kitchen counter. I told her I wasn't seeking divorce. I told her I wanted to understand, completely, the legal landscape of my marriage and my financial position, in the event that dissolution ever became necessary. I told her I wanted a full analysis. What was protected, what wasn't, what I could do right now, within the bounds of normal financial management, to clarify and defend the boundaries of my own estate if it ever came to that. She leaned back slightly. That's an unusual request from someone who's not currently filing. I work in financial compliance, I said. I don't wait for a gap to become a crisis before I document it. She studied me for a moment. I see, she said. She became my attorney that day. Over the next 18 months, with Ruth guiding the process, I took a series of steps. Each one, looked at individually, was completely ordinary. Routine, even. Together, they formed a legal architecture that would, when the time came, determine nearly everything about how the dissolution would play out. Step 1 was the premarital assets. I'd owned a condo before Nadia and I got married. Bought it with inheritance money from my paternal grandmother. That inheritance had gone straight into the purchase, no mixing with Nadia's finances, no joint contributions, nothing. Title was in my name only. After we bought the house together, we'd rented the condo out. The rental income went into an account I maintained separately. Always had. Ruth went through all the records and confirmed that the condo kept its character as separate property. But she flagged a risk: if any marital money had ever been used for repairs, improvements, or carrying costs on that property, even once, it could open the door to an argument that the marriage had a partial interest. I pulled the records. Clean. No marital funds had touched that property. Ever. The account that received rent and paid the condo's expenses had been mine alone from the start. I hadn't set that up with divorce in mind. I'd set it up that way because I was my father's son. Because keeping separate things separate and joint things joint was how I was built. It was as automatic to me as making sure a column of numbers adds up before you submit the report. The preparation didn't begin 3 years before that Tuesday. In a real sense, it began the day I got married. Before that, even. All the way back to an estate attorney in a wood-paneled office who believed that clean structure was not a luxury but a form of self-respect. Step 2 was the retirement accounts. I'd been contributing to a 401k since I was 24. At the time of our wedding, the account held $63,000. During 9 years of marriage, I'd added another $114,000, and with employer matching, the total marital era contributions came to roughly $141,000. The premarital $63,000 was documented in annual statements I had kept every single year. Every one. Physical copies in a locked filing cabinet in my home office. Scanned digital copies on the personal drive. Ruth said, the premarital balance and its growth is separate property in this state, as long as it's traceable. Your documentation makes it traceable. I said, I've got every statement since I opened the account. You'll need them. I have them. Step 3 was the biggest one, and the one that took the most work. The house. We'd bought it 6 years into the marriage. The down payment came from 2 sources. $60,000 from our joint savings, which we'd built together over those 6 years. And $40,000 from me, pulled from the rental income account, money traceable back to the condo, which was separate property. So the house had been purchased with mixed funding. That made it complicated. Ruth had explained this during our second meeting, and I'd gone home and sat with it for a week before coming back with a question. If I keep using rental income, which is separate property earnings, to pay down the mortgage going forward, does that create a documented separate property interest in the equity those payments build? She looked at me for a long beat. That is a legally sophisticated question, she said. I've been reading. Yes, she said. In this state, if you can show that specific mortgage payments came from a separate property source, and the payments are traceable through bank records, you can make an argument for a separate property credit against the equity at dissolution. It's not guaranteed. But it's supported by case law, and it gets a lot stronger with clean documentation. How do I document it? Open a dedicated account. It receives nothing but rent from the condo. It does nothing except receive that rent and make a portion of the monthly mortgage payment. The transfer amount should match exactly what you're claiming as a separate contribution. No marital funds go into or out of that account. And every transfer should carry a memo or notation identifying its source. I went home that afternoon and opened a new account at a bank Nadia and I didn't share. My name only. I redirected the condo rental deposits into it. And on the first of every month after that, I transferred a fixed amount from that account to the joint mortgage account with a memo line that read, rental property proceeds, separate property contribution. I did that for 22 consecutive months before Nadia left her phone on the counter. Every one of those transfers was documented. Corresponding bank statements from both the rental account and the mortgage account, organized by month, stored in a dedicated folder on the personal drive. 22 months of payments, each one traceable to its separate property source with the kind of precision that holds up under forensic accounting and doesn't flinch under cross-examination. I'm not describing all of this to imply I predicted exactly what was going to happen. I'm describing it because preparation is not the same as prophecy. You don't build a will because you plan to die on a Tuesday. You build one because you know Tuesday exists. That Tuesday morning continued. Nadia came downstairs around 8, dressed for work. Gray blazer, dark trousers. She looked put together, the way she always did, in a way I'd admired since the first year I knew her. She picked up her phone from the counter without glancing at the screen, dropped it in her bag, and grabbed her keys. You're quiet, she said. Tired, I said. You should go to bed earlier. Probably. She left at 8:15. I watched the car back out of the driveway and disappear around the curve of our street. Then I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and opened the log. Date, Tuesday. Time, 7:40. Observation, phone left unattended on counter. Screen up, no passcode active. Message preview from contact saved as M, content, last night was exactly what I needed. Thank you for everything. Subject retrieve phone without checking screen. No visible awareness of exposure. I closed the document. I drove to work. I didn't call Ruth that day. I'd been waiting for something concrete, not a suspicion, not a feeling, but a documented fact, and now I had one. But a single message, seen by accident, wasn't a complete picture. I had 89 entries now. I needed the full record before making any move. That evening I called David Park. David was a licensed digital forensics specialist and private investigator I'd identified 14 months earlier through a referral from a compliance attorney I'd worked with professionally. I had never hired him. His number was in my phone under tech consultant, which he was. I'd paid him $200 once, about a year back, to answer 6 hypothetical questions about the legal boundaries of digital evidence collection in our state. Now I was ready to go further. I'd like to move to an active engagement, I said. What do you need? I told him. I said I had a spouse I believed was conducting a relationship outside the marriage. I needed documentation that would hold up in court, gathered within state law. I'd already been working with a family law attorney on what was admissible and what wasn't. I wanted his professional read on the best approach. He said, in this state, you can legally record audio in a location where you have reasonable access. Your own home, your own car. You cannot place a tracker on a vehicle titled solely in your spouse's name. You can't access her accounts or devices without authorization. She doesn't have a vehicle titled in her name alone, I said. Both cars are jointly titled. Then GPS on either vehicle is legal for you as a co-owner. I know, I said. That's already done. Silence for a second. When did you install it? 19 months ago. Another beat of silence. You've been collecting location data for 19 months. Yes. Cloud synced? Time-stamped? Yes. All of it. Stored on a personal device she doesn't have access to. Mr. Marsh. He paused. What exactly do you need from me? Corroboration, I said. I need a credentialed professional to review my existing data, verify the collection method, and be available to testify about its integrity if it comes to that. I also need a few weeks of active surveillance on her movements, with your firm's standard documentation, so the record isn't solely self-generated. He quoted me $800 a day for active work plus expenses, with a flat fee for the data review depending on volume. I'll send you a summary tonight, I said. Give me a number and we'll start next week. That summary ran 11 pages. It covered 19 months of GPS location data, cross-referenced with my log entries. It showed a consistent pattern. Once a week, sometimes twice, Nadia's car went to an address in Lincoln Park that corresponded with her late work evenings. The address was a condominium building. I had identified that building in the 4th month of tracking. Then I'd done a property records search on the units, which is public information, available to anyone. I'd cross-referenced the names with Nadia's professional network, starting with her firm's published staff list and extending to their client roster, which was right there on the website. The name Marcus Whitfield showed up on the property records for Unit 4C. Marcus Whitfield also appeared on the client roster of Nadia's firm. He was listed as the principal of a development company called Whitfield Group. The firm had completed a commercial project for him about 18 months before Nadia's car started showing up at his building. I hadn't confronted her. I'd logged it. I'd kept building. David's active surveillance ran 3 weeks. He delivered a formal report, stamped with his firm's letterhead, his license number, dated and signed. 22 days of observation notes. 47 photographs taken from public locations. 4 documented instances of Nadia entering the Lincoln Park condo building. 2 instances where David visually confirmed her in the company of a man he identified, through his own public records work, as Marcus Whitfield, once in the building lobby, once on the rooftop common area. The report was clean, professional, and exactly what it appeared to be. 2 days later, I met with Ruth and brought everything. The 19 months of GPS data with David's reviewed summary. David's surveillance report. The printed log, 89 entries. Property records. And the financials, the condo documents, 16 years of retirement statements, 22 months of mortgage payment transfers from the rental income account, every bank statement, organized and tabbed. Ruth read through it all. It took 45 minutes. I sat across from her, drinking a lukewarm coffee someone had left on a side table, staring at a framed certificate on the wall behind her head. She'd passed the bar in 1998. When she finished, she put down the last page and looked at me. Eli, how long have you been putting this together? Actively? About 32 months. Before that, it was more ambient. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I've been practicing family law for 26 years. I've seen clients show up well prepared. I've seen a few who were impressively thorough. She paused. I don't think I've ever had someone walk in with this. Is anything missing? I asked. Tell me about your liquid assets. Joint and individual. I walked her through it. The joint checking carried about $12,000 at any given time, used for household expenses. Joint savings had $64,000. I had an individual savings account with $38,000, funded over the years from income I'd set aside before it hit the joint accounts, a practice I'd maintained since year 3 of the marriage, when I started separating in practice what had always been separate in my head, even if I hadn't formalized it yet. Has your wife ever contributed to the individual account? No. It's only ever received transfers from my individual checking, which is funded exclusively from what's left of my paycheck after the household contribution. So it's documentably separate. Funded from your earnings, held apart, never mixed. Correct. All right. She picked up a legal pad and started writing. Here's where we stand. She laid it out, and even in that moment, sitting in a divorce attorney's office with my guts in a knot, I found something steadying in the precision of it. The condo, separate property. Clean title chain from acquisition, no marital commingling. Market value around $412,000. Remaining mortgage $81,000. Equity of $331,000. Protected. The retirement account, premarital balance of $63,000, plus growth, documented through 16 years of statements. The marital contributions were subject to equitable distribution, but the premarital portion was defensible. Total account value approximately $308,000. Defensible separate property portion, with proportional appreciation, estimated at around $114,000. The house, market value roughly $680,000. Remaining mortgage about $290,000. Equity around $390,000. Of that, the $40,000 from the down payment, traceable to separate rental income, plus the 22 months of documented mortgage contributions from the same source, created a credible argument for a separate property credit. Ruth estimated that credit, conservatively, at about $68,000. The remaining equity, roughly $322,000, was marital. Joint savings, $64,000. Marital. Split. My individual savings, $38,000. Documented as separately funded. She looked up from the pad. A 50-50 split of the marital estate, after your separate property credits, puts your wife at roughly $193,000 from the house equity, $32,000 from joint savings, and a portion of the marital retirement contributions. Total marital estate, before carve-outs, is somewhere around $450,000. Her equitable share lands in the neighborhood of $225,000. And my total retained position after everything? She did the math. Condo equity, $331,000. Separate retirement, about $114,000. Individual savings, $38,000. Your share of the marital estate, roughly $225,000. Total, approximately $708,000. And hers? About $225,000 from the marital estate. Assuming the separate property arguments hold. She tapped the stack of documents with one finger. With this documentation, they should. I sat with that number for a moment. When can we file? Whenever you want. But I want to ask you something first. Go ahead. Is there any part of you that wants to try to save this? I didn't answer immediately. I actually thought about it. Honestly. I thought about 11 years. What they'd been and what they hadn't. The early years, when everything felt like it was building towards something. The middle years, when the building slowed down and you started just maintaining. The last 3 years, when maintaining started to feel like performing. I thought about the phone on the counter. The message on the screen. Thank you for everything. And what it meant that she'd left it there, face up, whether it was carelessness, or fatigue from keeping a secret for years, or some unconscious crack in the wall she'd built. No, I said. All right, Ruth said. Let's talk about timing. Timing mattered for one specific reason she'd flagged in our second meeting, 18 months back. In our state, marital waste, meaning the spending of marital funds for the benefit of a third party during the marriage, gets factored into equitable distribution. If Nadia had spent our money on Marcus Whitfield during the affair, those expenses could count against her share. I had the credit card records. All of them. 3 years worth. Because I managed our household financial accounts, the records were mine to access. I'd already pulled them. I'd already gone through them. Over 31 months, I had flagged 214 transactions at restaurants, hotels, and retail locations that didn't match Nadia's stated schedule on the dates they occurred. I'd cross-referenced the hotel locations with the GPS data. 11 hotel stays at properties within a half-mile of the Lincoln Park address, during periods when her car was logged at the condo building. Total, $6,240, charged to the joint credit card. I gave Ruth the records with the relevant transactions highlighted in yellow. She flipped through them. $6,000 in documented marital waste. That offsets her distribution. We filed on a Thursday. Ruth submitted the petition with full financial disclosure, asset documentation, separate property claims, everything attached. Nadia was served at her office the following Monday at 10:15 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was at my desk, calendar open. I'd noted it as a contingency timestamp. Force of habit. She called at 10:28. Eli. What did you do? I filed for divorce. Why didn't you talk to me first? Because talking wasn't going to give me the information I needed to make the right decision. What does that even mean? It means I've been building the information I needed for about 3 years. I have it now. The decision's made. Dead air. Then, you've been planning this for 3 years? I've been preparing. There's a difference. Eli, I know about Marcus Whitfield, I said. I have 19 months of GPS records. 3 weeks of professional surveillance with photographs. 31 months of credit card records. 89 log entries. My attorney has all of it. The silence that followed was unlike any silence in 11 years of knowing her. How long have you known? Her voice had changed. Flatter. Smaller. I've known something was off for about 3 years. I've had the name for about 2. Professional documentation for 3 weeks. And you just... She stopped. Restarted. You just kept living here. With me. This whole time. I kept building a defensible position, I said. Yes. That's not normal, Eli. Maybe not. But it's where we are. She hung up. Her attorney contacted Ruth within 4 days. His name was Patrick Ames. Based on Ruth's read of his opening salvo, he was competent but hadn't yet seen what we had. His initial position was boilerplate, equitable distribution of everything, no separate property concessions, a challenge to the premarital retirement claim on the theory that the growth happened during the marriage and should therefore be marital. Ruth sent him the documentation. Everything. 16 years of retirement statements. The condo purchase records. 22 months of mortgage transfers with memo lines. GPS logs. David Park's surveillance report. Credit card records with the hotel charges highlighted. Ames asked for 2 weeks to review. He called Ruth at the end of those 2 weeks. She called me right after. Patrick Ames wants to settle. Terms? He's conceding separate property status on the condo, the premarital retirement balance, and your individual savings. He's proposing 50-50 on the net marital estate after those exclusions and after a marital waste offset of $4,000. The documented waste is $6,240. Not $4. He's pushing back on 2 of the 11 hotel charges. His argument is that GPS shows the car at the building, not Nadia herself. Without tighter evidence, he says she could have been anywhere in the neighborhood. David Park's report places her at the Lincoln Park address on both dates. I know. Sent that over this morning. He'll fold on the full amount. What does the settlement look like with the full offset? She walked me through it. Nadia would receive roughly $216,000 from the house equity split. $32,000 from joint savings. A portion of the marital retirement contributions. Minus the $6,240 waste offset. Net to her, approximately $240,000. Net to me, the condo equity, the premarital retirement portion, individual savings, and my share of the marital estate. Somewhere in the range of $700,000. What about the house itself? Who gets it? His position is a buyout, Ruth said. Nadia wants to stay. She's proposing a cash-out refinance to cover your equity. At current rates, I said, a refi on that property, rolling the existing mortgage plus a buyout of my equity, puts her payment about 12% above her income qualification threshold. Ruth was quiet. How do you know that? I pulled her income from our joint returns and ran the debt-to-income calculation. So the buyout doesn't work for her. Not at current rates. Not without additional income she can't document. She'll have to sell. The house went on the market 11 weeks after we filed. Nadia moved into a place in Wicker Park. The house sold in 32 days, $6,000 above asking. An unremarkable transaction by the standards of our neighborhood in that market. I'd known it would sell fast. I'd been watching the comps for 2 years, same as I watched everything else. The settlement closed on a Thursday afternoon, for months after I'd stood on the back porch with my coffee and watched the sprinklers. Ruth sent me a summary document that evening, 4 pages, final distribution numbers. I read it at my desk in the same office where I worked for 12 years. Put it in the folder I'd labeled for this. Put the folder in the filing cabinet. Went back to the compliance gap analysis I'd been running on a mid-sized loan portfolio. After work, I drove home and cooked dinner. Pasta. Something simple. I ate it at the kitchen counter, which felt larger now, the way rooms feel when you know nobody else is going to walk through the door. I didn't hear from Nadia directly until the following month, when she texted asking whether I had the external hard drive she used for design work. It was in the garage, left behind during the move. I texted her the address of the storage unit where I'd put the things she hadn't taken, and gave her the access code. She didn't reply. About 8 months after the divorce was finalized, I heard about Marcus Whitfield through a professional connection. His development company, Whitfield Group, was apparently under financial strain. A commercial project had blown past its budget. The architecture firm where Nadia worked, or had worked, had been the designer on the project, and there was some kind of billing dispute between the two companies. The person who told me this didn't know anything about the personal side. I didn't fill in the blanks for them. Nadia left the architecture firm 6 months after that. I know because she's a working professional with a public profile, and her departure was noted in a regional trade publication covering design and construction. I wasn't looking for it. It crossed my feed. I have no current information about Marcus Whitfield beyond what I've described. I stopped tracking anything related to him the day the divorce was finalized, because it had become irrelevant. Closed file. No further entries needed. I kept the condo. It still generates rental income, still deposited into the same account, still used only for property expenses and the occasional extra principal payment on the remaining mortgage. Each transfer still carries the same memo notation I started using 3 years ago. Not because I'm anticipating another divorce. Because documentation is what I do. Because clean records are a kind of order that holds things steady, and I don't know any other way to maintain a system. Honestly, at this point, I don't think I want to learn another way. The logged document still lives on the personal drive. I haven't added to it since the morning I saw the phone on the counter. 89 entries. That's where it ends. Sometimes I open it and scroll through. Not with grief, exactly. Not with satisfaction either. More with the detached attention I bring to any closed case. Reading the completed record for what it is, a document of its own time. 89 entries across 34 months. The shape of a change I noticed before I understood it, documented before I knew I'd need it, preserved in a form that outlasted everything that came after. My father died in the winter I turned 25. He left behind a will that was precise, complete, and contained exactly 0 surprises for anyone named in it. His estate settled quickly and cleanly, without any of the fighting that usually follows a death when the paperwork isn't done. His sister, my Aunt Carol, had expected to be left out and wasn't. She said to me at the gathering after the service that he'd always been a step ahead of everybody. I said, he wasn't ahead of everybody. He was ahead of the future. That's different. She frowned. What's the difference? Being ahead of people is a competition. Being ahead of the future is just preparation. She didn't quite follow what I meant. I'm not sure I did either, at 25. I understand it now. I'm not ahead of anyone. I have no interest in being ahead of anyone. I kept clean records because clean records are correct. I built defensible structures because undefensible ones collapse when you need them most. I prepared for an outcome I didn't want to be true because preparation has nothing to do with pessimism. It's just the recognition that the future is uncertain, and uncertainty is not an excuse to be unready. The future showed up on a Tuesday at 7:40. The phone was on the counter. The message was on the screen. I poured my coffee. Walked to the porch. Watched the sprinklers run. And then I did the thing I'd already been doing, quietly, without dramatics, without the noise people seem to expect at the moment things fall apart. I moved to the next step. Same as the step before it, and the one before that. One correct action after another, taken in order, from a position I'd spent years building. The results were what they were. Documented. Defensible. Final. That's the whole story. And it ends quietly, because it was never going to end any other way.